before joining the Valley News, John had been an editor at the Los Angeles Times and a reporter in the Los Angeles bureau at the Wall Street Journal, where he covered the entertainment industry. He lives in Norwich with his wife, who is a psychologist at DHMC, and their two daughters. John grew up in Pennsylvania and attended St. John's College in Annapolis, Maryland. John, the screen is yours.
Thanks, Todd. And I'm honored to be included in Todd's Friends and Family Network. I believe you've had my brother-in-law, David Diamond, on the air here as well. So we are, and maybe there's another Lippman Zukowski Diamond out there that you can recruit into this at some point. I'm really privileged to be here today with all of you. I'm happy to talk a little bit about what I do at the Valley News, and more important, listen, hear from any of you as to, things you would, stories you might like to see in the paper as well, ideas. Ideas are the most difficult part of my job. I would imagine that's true of, any journalist and many jobs as well. Then comes execution, but really it's the coming up with the idea for the story is the greatest challenge, and it happens every week. I am the business writer at the Valley News. I may be the only and last business writer at a newspaper in the Twin States. I don't know. Maybe the Manchester paper has one. Vermont Digger has a full-time business reporter. As you are all no doubt aware, we are operating with considerably fewer resources now than we were a year ago, than we were 2 years ago, than we were 5 and 10 years ago. I look for business stories to write about in the Upper Valley that I think would be of interest to our readers. And by business is a fairly broad and elastic term, at least from the way that I approach it. When I was at previous incarnations at other outlets, Los Angeles Times, Wall Street Journal, other magazines, newspapers before there as well, business always seemed to have a dollar sign in front of it when in the story. There had to be dollars somewhere. And when people think of business, that's also generally what they think about still today. But I try to expand that into sort of what people do for a living, or what they do as a what's called a side hustle. Or writing about and reporting about and finding out about business in the Upper Valley presents a lot of challenges. There are sort of two worlds here, at least in business economics. There's the what I would call the high-end world, which is the world around Dartmouth, technology, DHMC. It's a big world in terms of money. But it's a small world in terms of the number of people that participate in it compared to how most of us make our livelihoods here in the Upper Valley. So I end up writing a lot about small business, medium business, mom and pop businesses, sort of what people do every day, for a living. And I would say, if you were to ask me, not that anybody did, but I was sort of anticipating, what sort of are the biggest trends I've seen since I arrived here in 2011. I would really have to say it's sort of the Holocaust in the retail industry. There were, as I'm sure everybody on this call is better aware than I am, scores, hundreds of small businesses, retail businesses that used to exist in the Upper Valley and in the heart of the Upper Valley, by which I mean Lebanon, Hanover, Hartford. And it seems that not a week goes by, and this started long before COVID accelerated the trend, that I'm not writing a story about some long time family-owned store or business that was closing. Now, a lot of it has been driven by demographics. The Upper Valley, as we all know, is older demographically than elsewhere in the country, and a lot of families have been retiring. There wasn't anybody sort of to pick up that wanted to step into those roles that their parents did, but there has been a wholesale destruction of the retail industry because of the rise of online and digital retailing. And it's, sad to see these businesses go. So many of them, have the same story to tell. Just all anybody needs to do is sort of walk around Hanover and see what's happened in the past few years. Walk up and down 12A and see the vacant retail spots in the shopping plazas, almost all of which, except two, are owned by huge commercial real estate companies, outside of the Upper Valley. Most of all, I enjoy what I enjoy about my work is I was going to say getting to meet people, but since March, I haven't been able to meet a lot of people other than over Zoom calls and the telephone, although I still go out occasionally, and learning about their stories, learning about what it is they do and how they do it and why they do it, and passing on that narrative to our readers. And it really, there's nothing that's not too small that wouldn't get my attention. If somebody's opening up a cafe or closing a retail shop, I'm interested in that. I'm also like to write about sort of workplace issues, workforce issues. One of the topics that I enjoy researching and talking about the most is manufacturing, which is has the decline of manufacturing long predated my arrival up here. It's a story that goes back to the 70s and 80s and 90s. But talking to the people who were involved in that sector, it's really fascinating to learn about what an economic engine this part of the world was at one time. In 100 years, somebody's going to be writing these stories about the desolation in Silicon Valley or something like that. But it is a window into our past and our heritage, and there's still remnants of it around in the area, Newport, in Claremont, things like that. In my previous incarnations, the challenges of my job was frequently to get through the corporate structure of large companies to try to get people to talk to me. Here, not dealing with those layers, but this being the Upper Valley, this being northern New England, frequently people are, reticent to talk. People are private, and those frequently are the greatest challenges, other than finding an idea. There are some things, I don't know how much any of you sort of pay attention to this, but the Valley News, has really stringent standards on, how it is we are able to report our stories and what we are able to write. Only with the rarest of exceptions, and I don't think it's ever happened in one of my stories, but do we use information that is based but not attributed to somebody. So I can't, in my stories, say, some have a negative comment and then say, according to somebody close to the situation. You will read that all the time in places like the New York Times or Politico or the Wall Street Journal or any of the major media outlets, either print or digital. But we pretty much stick to the people having to be on the record, which raises the bar. So, there are a lot of things that, there are things that, frequently I wind up not being able to report. I hear of a company that's about to be sold, or a rumor that sounds really true and probably is true, but, it can't appear in my stories because if somebody is unwilling to go on the record. I don't want to sort of blab and without addressing questions or concerns that anybody on this call may have. So I really entertain questions, and I'll answer them to the best of my ability. I'm really curious as a reporter to know what's on your mind, and if there's certain areas of the business or the economy in the Upper Valley that you think would be worthy of coverage in the Valley News, and so I am happy to to take questions, or even if you wanted to know what it is I do in my job or how I go about it. I'm happy to talk about it.
I saw David Allen raise his hand, so I'll field questions for you, John. David Allen, go ahead.
Thanks, Todd. I really enjoy reading the Valley News and your articles, John. One of the things that concerns me, and I don't feel like I have a good understanding about, is the employment situation. On the one hand, we were chatting before this meeting started about the difficulty of getting plumbers and other contract people. On the other hand, I know that there are people who are having trouble getting enough to eat, and we have a homeless problem, and we have a housing problem, and we have people who work in restaurants who are having a difficult time making a living, and I have a hard time reconciling. And on the other hand, something like 600 or 900 job openings at DHMC, and tremendous workforce shortages, and I have a hard time figuring out what's happening. Can you tell me anything about it?
That is a great question, David. Thank you. One of the best comments I have ever heard about employment in the Upper Valley, I came from somebody I know named Todd Allen, who we were once talking about this, and he said, the issue in the Upper Valley is not unemployment; the issue is underemployment, and that is so true. I'd have to go into my email to see what the latest unemployment statistic is in the Upper Valley. I think it's somewhere maybe around 4%, just sort of going on my memory, which is pretty low. At the nadir of unemployment last fall, it was down to something like 2.8%. But even at the peak of the Great Recession and at the economic shutdown earlier this year, it never reached the levels that you see in nationally. So I think we were somewhere up, maybe 7, 8, 9% unemployment in the Upper Valley, which by that I mean the micropolitan area, which is Lebanon, Hartford, Hanover. And a lot of that is obviously due to the two big employment engines, here, which is the college and the medical center. There's no denying that. And there is a real problem in finding workers in the trades, plumbers, electricians. Try finding getting an electrician. I've been waiting weeks to get some work done. I'm sure you all have your own experiences. So where there are a lot of openings at the sort of lower end of the pay scale, which is now around $12, $13, $14 an hour. You can go up and down 12A and see signs. Some of it is seasonal driven, such as FedEx and UPS, but Fujifilm Dimetics, has lots of openings for shifts and things like that. Anecdotally, I heard, and I'm sure you all have as well, is during when the stimulus checks went out and the extra and the extra unemployment money, the federal $600 a week, that incentivized a lot of people to stay at home because they were earning more than they would have if they were working 40 or even 50 hours a week in a low end job. So historically, unemployment has not been the big challenge in the Upper Valley. It's been underemployment, which is, people making enough money to get by or barely get by, but having to do that. And I'm talking outside the college and the medical center and the professionals who service those businesses and populations. Finding enough work, enough employment, and you frequently have to piece it together with 2 or 3 jobs on the side. That has been a long time systemic issue. There have been things that have affected it, which is sort of the flight of youth away, especially in Vermont. People get out of high school, they get out of college, they're not coming back, at least to the Upper Valley. And for all the obvious reasons, and this is what employers have been facing as well. There are, yes, lots of jobs. I won't say lots of jobs, but there are a fair number of jobs out there. They are mostly at the lower end of the wage scale. If they're at the lower edge of the wage scale, cost of living in the Upper Valley is not adjusted downward proportionally. The housing issue is a longstanding one. I've often said that somebody somewhere in the Upper Valley at this very moment is having a panel session on the housing shortage in the Upper Valley. I can talk about the reason, what I think the reasons are for that. But if you're professionally educated, have a graduate degree, chances are you are a lot better off right now than if you are at the lower end of the wage scale. I don't know if that directly answers your question, David.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions? Bill, go ahead. You're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
John, Bill Bittinger. I've lived in the Upper Valley 30 years and been concerned with community development in the broadest sense, housing, workforce, places of work, and workforce housing. One of the big themes, in addition to those that you just touched on, the demise of retail and the skills gap, that I'm very focused is that with during the past decade, we've seen the emergence of new tech and increasing concentration of employment centers in big urban areas, a la Boston, et cetera. I've always felt that the challenge for the Upper Valley, notwithstanding Dartmouth and DH, is to get to a critical size where we have a big enough base in that area to attract people, particularly if there's a spouse involved who could also find employment. Could you talk a little bit about where we are on that particular segment of our economy? And let's talk about companies that are here, the degree of expansion that's occurring. Let's talk about startups, which I'm familiar with. We have several down in White River Junction, great success stories. And then finally, relocation. The great dream of David Clem is we'll bring them up from Boston, they'll go to West Lebanon. Can you speak to that for us, please?
Yeah, thanks, Bill. If I was actually going to report the story, you'd probably be one of the first people I would call. So, and David Clem has been, has had, been trying to get that project built, north of West Lebanon. One of the first stories that I did, I remember when I went from editing to reporting, was he brought a bunch of people into the Hanover Inn to sort of showcase the project that he was developing there to hope to invite the companies in. There are a lot of startups in the Upper Valley. Lebanon Chamber of Commerce recently had a sort of one of these Zoom call pitch sessions with biotech companies, and there was something like 24 of them at least. And these are small; these can be small companies, anything from 1 or 2 people, working part-time to something at the Dartmouth Regional Technology Center, which might have dozens of employees. The challenge with when I talk to entrepreneurs, the challenge in finding people is that basically something very simple and basic. What we all love this area for, and what attracted us to this area, the beautiful outdoors, the good schools, really they're all good up here compared to elsewhere. The relative safety, and all this was pre-COVID, is sometimes, a tough sell to smart young people coming out of college who are technology focused, technology oriented. There is, to put it plainly, there's, unless you're into hiking, outdoor sports and things like that, there's not a lot of entertainment activities up here in terms of recreation, music, the performing arts. There's things around the college, of course, but it's not it's not like an urban hub. Youth tends to gravitate, as most of it towards urban hubs. We get the breakout. We get the breakout youth who is, equally interested in algorithms as they are hiking and craft brew, but that's and artisanal coffee, but that is appears to be a relatively small amount. The other challenge, as you all know, has been telecommunications infrastructure. It's a lot better now than it was when I first got here 9 years ago. But outside the centers of sort of Lebanon, Hanover, Hartford, it's spotty, and so even though we are in a better place than we were, it still presents the challenges. It's interesting. One of the biggest businesses, in the Upper Valley is what would somebody think is a business? I'm just curious. If I had to say what's near $500 million business in the Upper Valley, what would you think it would be?
Single business that's about $500 million?
Yeah, closing in there.
White Mountain Insurance?
No.
Hypertherm?
I mean, I don't know what it might be, but...
Not what you were thinking of.
And by the way, they are based at the, I'll give you a hint, they're based at the Dartmouth Technology Center now. Pete and Jerry's Eggs.
Oh, come on.
No, it's huge. I mean, and I'm not going to, he's got a private jet. I mean, it goes in and out of the Lebanon airport. I mean, that's how big it is. It's a marketing company. What it is these aren't his farms. I mean, he contracts with suppliers. He tells them how to raise the hens. He gets them the financing. He works with banks. They ship the eggs, to them. They sort them. They do the marketing. It's really a brilliant. By the way, Todd, he's somebody. Jesse LaFlamme.
They've spoken to us.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's huge, but but what could be more, sort of 19th century than eggs? I mean, it's just is. But I mean, it's bigger than Hypertherm, bigger than Fujifilm. And I guess the reason I'm bringing that up is to illustrate that frequently it doesn't necessarily have to be, we don't have the technology here, we don't have but even though we do, but and he grew this bit, he really grew this business, himself over the past 20 years. Anyway.
Any other questions? Going back to retail, John, I actually have two questions. I'm going to do this one first. Going back to retail and pretty much looking at 12A and the big stores that now are closing. And you hear rumors about Amazon coming into empty retail spaces. Have you heard anything? What are your thoughts about, the J.C. Penney's and those big stores that are closing?
Well, so that is funny you should mention that. So this is sort of an example. When I was saying earlier, I can't report things that I have on pretty good sources, but if nobody's willing to go on the record, I can't report it. So, for example, in regards to those stores in 12A, it's my understanding that there's a pretty good chance that Target's going to go into the Kmart building, but I can't get anybody to go on the record about that. There were rumors in regards to Amazon and the JCPenney space, but I would discount that for the simple reason is Route 12A could not handle the truck traffic that an Amazon fulfillment and distribution center would generate. I think the Amazon center in Nashua is something like 700 vehicles a day in and out of there, and there's no way 12A, unless they build their own exit off of 89 right into the back of the Upper Valley Plaza. I don't think they can handle it. I don't think they'll ever get through. So I would, I tend to not to, even though it would really help Amazon. This is a key location because of the interchange. And I don't think they have a distribution fulfillment center in this area. They're a little bit secret about where they are. You can find them, but it involves a little work. But I don't think there's one here or northeast of us.
My other question is, maybe you could kind of walk us through a typical, a feature story, one that would show up on, the front page of the business section on a Sunday morning. How long typically are you working on that? When do you put it to bed for a Sunday publication? Kind of life cycle of the story.
Yeah, and thanks. And I hope this isn't too much inside baseball, for the participants on this call, but I can certainly take you through it because it is a weekly challenge, that's filled with sort of both a terror and elation at the same time. So I'll sort of preface that with the nature of the job has changed considerably as our resources have shrunk for all obvious reasons, which I don't need to belabor here. It used to be that when I first switched over from editing and went back to reporting back in 2016, if I needed to, I could spend a couple weeks or 3 weeks on, a particular story. If for example, my investigation into what did VTEL do with that $125 million it got in stimulus funding, in 2011 to bring out wireless broadband network throughout Vermont. I worked on that for nearly a month, and I can't do that anymore. And now everything is fast and furious, and I have to do multiple stories a week in addition to the Sunday story, which needs to be wrapped up and finished Wednesday before it appears Sunday, because we don't have the editing resources to edit the story on a Friday any longer. So I have to think a week, 2 weeks out in advance as to what I will be doing for what we call the centerpiece in the business section, which is the story with the photograph, and then the column, which is sort of a collection of news that doesn't quite have the weight to become a story in and of itself. So, I generally need to have the idea locked in 10 days ahead of time. That is the Friday before, 10 days ahead of time, not the Friday before the Sunday, but the Friday before the previous Friday, so that the photo desk can line up, because they're so short-staffed, so that they can and are divided running around all over the Upper Valley for all the other stories in the paper. I need to arrange to let the photo desk know what they will be photographing for the story 10 days ahead of time, so they can schedule the few people that they have. So generally what I do is I try to get started 10 days ahead of time on the story. My schedule is, so Thursday and Friday I'm working on the next, not the following Sunday, but the Sunday beyond that story. I do the reporting for it on Monday, Tuesday, and I'm usually writing today, Wednesday, to file before I leave on, sometime Wednesday night. So the editor will have both the story, the centerpiece story, and the column ready to edit on Thursday morning when they get in. It is, every week it is a challenge, to find the ideas. Things fall through. So I'm, scrambling on Monday or Tuesday for something I should have had wrapped up on Thursday or Friday. And this is frustrating in a lot of ways, because frequently, I have a bad habit of over-reporting stories, but in this day and age, it's 2, 3, 4 phone calls, 5 phone calls, interviews, and then start writing. I don't have the time to do the 25 interviews that I used to have. And I'm sure I know what I am experiencing, everybody, is experiencing who is, working in a challenging environment where resources have been, are at a minimum now. But I just think that's life going forward now for, as long as I can see in the future. So everything's basically supposed to be wrapped up by Friday. I usually start the following Thursday for the a week from the next Sunday.
Great.
Anyway.
Thank you. Ginia, we can always count on Ginia for a question.
Well, I have 2 particular interests in the newspaper stories you do. So the first one is what I would call the human interest story. In other words, somebody starts a business. Well, how did they happen to do that? What was their background? What was, et cetera, et cetera? That's the kind of story I think is terrific. And I wonder if you welcome suggestions and how to go about that. Second question I have has to do with education. Wondering if there is a problem with not having the skills needed for some of the jobs in the Upper Valley. And if that is true, then what kind of affiliations have there been with some of the local educational institutions to kind of fill that gap? So,
okay. Thank you, Gina. Those are both great questions. I love the human interest element too. I think it's probably what I enjoy most about my work is learning about where people came from and what's motivated them to do what they do. So that and I hope my stories illustrate that. For example, this is hardly sensitive information. So for a story I'm doing for this coming Sunday, which I've reported and will start writing after I get off this telephone call or Zoom call, is about a woman who is all started with the Stratford Historical Society having to find a new home. So what they are doing is they're getting to buy the former Masonic Lodge building in South Stratford, which is owned by the Masons and has been a home to a series of cafes that have never really worked in that space. They're buying that from the Masons for $1. And not Robin, sorry, Phoebe Mix, Robin Mix's sister, who owns the red brick building where the post office is in Stratford Village, is going to be opening up a coffee shop in the space where the Historical Society was. And it's an interesting story about how, she's a former tax attorney with the IRS. She didn't have Trump's tax returns to give me, but anyway, is retired and is opening up this cafe, which she tested the idea by setting up a couple of folding chairs in the parking lot one afternoon and seeing the traffic that came by to the post office and local residents, and to try to say, oh, is there enough here to support a cafe that would be open from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. So she's, starting the permitting process on that. So, those are the kind of stories that I enjoy talking about, and I'm glad to know that you enjoy reading them as well. In terms of education, this has been, along with workforce housing, one of the longest-standing issues in the Upper Valley. So there are programs at area high schools, in particular Randolph High School, Lebanon High School, and I think Stevens High School, where they are working on some I call them sort of bridge programs, where the students enroll and then they spend part of the day at the high school and the other day at Fujifilm Dimetics, Hypotherm, GW Plastics, which just got acquired by a Swedish company for like $240 million. Is very active in this. I don't know what these companies have been doing since COVID, but they've Whelan Engineering in Charlestown has been active in this, where high school students, take tech classes and then are transported to the manufacturing facilities where they are sort of do some hands-on learning so that they get the necessary skills. Vermont Technical College, one of the has also been very active in this, obvious, for all the obvious reasons. The challenge is getting kids interested in this. They're so oriented towards their phones that, showing them that there are other opportunities leading them to other opportunities, can be very difficult. The good news is there are, still jobs for, that start at $15, $20 an hour and can, move up meaningfully if the students take advantage of these bridge hybrid programs that are available. But again, I want to emphasize that I haven't looked into this since COVID has happened. I don't know if these programs have been suspended or not, but there are about 3 or 4 high schools in the Upper Valley that are actively trying to do something about this.
Thank you.
John, we're gonna end it there. Thank you very much. I think this was a great talk, great Q&A. Really appreciate it. We're gonna go on with the business portion of our meeting. You're welcome to stay, but usually our speakers don't.
We're having an interest in supporting the Valley News. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for our readers, and I just hope that we are meeting the expectations that are asked of us. And anytime you have a story idea, a lead, a tip, shoot me an email, call me up on the phone, and I'd be very grateful for that. Thank you all. Thanks.
Thank
Tom,
you, John.
for this opportunity.
Thanks a lot.